So you got a quiz in front of you. Take some time to answer the quiz and the questions.
Thank you, sir.
I didn't add an introduction for myself with this presentation, but I'm Jimmy Hart. I was in education for 31 years. I decided to walk away after 31 years, retire, and do something different. And so now I do education consulting. I work with the school districts throughout the country on our framework. It's called RAI, R-A-I, Respect, Affirm, Include. One of the districts that's taken advantage of our resources the most has been Tanque Verde School District. We've been working at school district for 4 years. I love Black history. I love all history, quite frankly. I served as Director of African American Student Services in Tucson Unified School District for 13 years and did a lot in terms of curriculum development. Also served as Director over the Asian and Refugee Student Services for TUSD. Let me see if I got my answer key in here for the quiz. Yeah, I put my answer key in here. All right, so for time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and I'll give you all the answers, but I'm going to do it while I'm doing my presentation. So we're literally going to go in 45 minutes. We're going to go from pre-colonization all the way up to the present. All the way up to the present. And I promise it won't take 3 hours. And I also want to thank Mr. Ed Buster, board member Ed Buster, Vail School District, we talk off and on, and he put the idea out at ASBA to do this type of workshop, which I think is outstanding. Collaboration with the Black Caucus, ASBA, to put something out in schools that schools can use during Black History Month, and teachers can just pop it in and the video will go out to YouTube and share it and show it within classes during Black History Month. This picture on the screen is Paul Laurence Dunbar, and that's one of the questions on your quiz. So the first question is, in what year did the very first segregated school for African American students open? And so I'll give you that here in a second. This quote here, I like to always start off with this quote here. History buffs, Carter G. Woodson. He is the creator of Black History Month as we know it today. It was Black History Week when he created it. It was by design a particular week for Frederick Douglass's birthday and President Abe Lincoln's birthday. And so he's the creator of Black History Week, which we know as Black History Month. But this quote here is a critical, important quote. If you can control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. When you determine what a man shall think, you do not have to concern yourself about what he will do. If you make a man feel that he is inferior, you do not have to compel him to accept an inferior status, for he will seek it himself. If you make a man think that he is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told, and if there is no back door, his very nature will demand it. Very interesting perspective from Carter G. Woodson. And he wrote this in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, in 1933. And quite frankly, you can see how this plays out sometimes in our schools in terms of how students perceive themselves, or how students may not believe they're good at math or good at English. All right, pre-colonial North America. I want to introduce you to Imhotep. We don't teach about this in our schools. Imhotep was considered a multi-genius, known as the world's first multi-genius. He was a doctor, had an engineering background, did some architecture, and he was a poet and philosopher. Imhotep diagnosed more than 200 diseases. He founded a medical school, and he is the inventor of the very first pyramid. It was called a step pyramid. This is a conversation we don't normally have in our schools. I talk about Imhotep because a lot of times different perspectives in terms of history are forgotten about or left out the books, which is why we came up with the title for the workshop. But if you look at the pyramid, you can see Africa's influence across the globe. Bottom right is Las Vegas. Most of us probably have seen that, if not all of us. Bottom left is in Korea. Upper right is Manhattan, New York, and upper left is Memphis, Tennessee. Designed the exact same way. The inside is laid out differently. Newer technology, but still the same. Washington Monument. You can see on the left, this was built in at latest 1640 BCE. You can see the resemblance, the design. Stadiums. We credit stadiums to the Greeks and the Romans all the time. But here you can see this was built in 238 BCE. 238 BCE. You can see the tunnels underneath. Same concept. But none of this is ever talked about as coming from people of African descent. Columns and archways. The picture on the left is the Library of Congress. My kids, we went to DC when they were younger. We took them on a tour of the Library of Congress. The tour guide literally said that archways and columns came from Greeks and Romans. My kids got a little upset. And I was like, she's doing what she's told to do in her description. But you can see this picture here in Morocco. There was arches and columns. I have the year cut off on that, but you can go out there and research Morocco, arches and columns. That relates to Carter G. Woodson's comment, because we're not taught that aspect in school. 1619 to 1899, a lot's happened within our country. 1619, indentured servants came to the United States. The first indentured servants / slaves were landed in Jamestown, which is in Virginia. Then we had the pre-emancipation. Then there was the post-emancipation. And I'll share a little bit about the pre-emancipation. The history of the African-American student in the United States education system is deeply rooted in a struggle for equality, access, empowerment. Prior to emancipation, enslaved African Americans were systemically denied access to education. Many states had laws prohibiting the education of slaves, fearing that literacy would foster ideas of freedom and rebellion. During the same time period, there were African American educators teaching to the best of their ability. A lot of this fell on the churches. Churches used the Bible, preachers could read, pastors read, other folks read. So the churches were used to help educate African Americans. And education continued to be segregated. That's some of the struggle up to 1899. So now I want to get into Arizona's untold past of African Americans in education, 1900 to the present. So here you have a picture of, and this is, I believe, the first question on your slide. In what year did the very first segregated school be created for African Americans? It was 1910. This is a picture of Booker T. Washington High School. This was built in 1928 for African Americans. It was established by local school districts and played a significant role in the education and socialization of children in the community. In March of 1909, the territorial legislature passed a proposal to segregate schools. Prior to opening Phoenix's first segregated school in 1910, African Americans had hired Governor Kibbe, who was for keeping schools integrated. But he went back into private practice. But they lost the suit and ended up getting their own school. The Phoenix Elementary School District opened the Frederick Douglass Elementary School for colored children in 1910. The very first teacher on record is a lady named Lucy B. Craig, and you'll learn more about her here in a little bit. And what I'm sharing with you, it gives you a history of things that have happened in Phoenix, Tucson, I've got Casa Grande, even Flagstaff, and I even have something in here from Yuma. A lot of times we know about the African American history within our own city, but not necessarily across the state. So again, before 1909, schools were integrated, but then laws were put into place. Among Tucson's earliest schools were the Academy of St. Joseph, which opened in 1867, Drachman, Davis, and Safford, all schools still in play in Tucson. And again, with the 1909, the Arizona legislature passed a law mandating that Arizona school children be segregated by race for the first 8 years of school. Arizona became a state in 1912. Which is the same year that the Dunbar School was opened in Tucson, Arizona. And that building, that's a present day picture of the original campus on the left. And during desegregation, that part on the right, the school district, it became John Spring Junior High. And now that set of buildings is owned by the African American community. And you'll see this play out in different parts of the presentation where the African American community have taken on closed schools to continue to support the community. Fast forward to 1920. There's a high school that played an important part in Phoenix history. It was the only legally segregated high school in Phoenix. In fact, one of its former students remembers how common it was to have teachers with a master's degree at a time when few people did. This particular school closed in 1954, nearly 40 years later, and it's now listed in the National Register of Historical Sites. In fact, let me go back. I went ahead. So this is actually, this school was renamed Paul Laurence Dunbar in Phoenix. And so on your quiz you have how many schools are noted as named their schools after Paul Laurence Dunbar. There are at least 3 prior to 1935, 1940. And I just read the information on Carter G. Washington, which is now a museum in the Phoenix area. So we've already can see 2 schools in 2 different cities where the community has taken on preserving the history of the school. Now we go to Flagstaff. You're nodding your head there. Yes, Flagstaff, Arizona had a segregated school for African American students named Dunbar School as well. Established in 1927, it was named after Paul Laurence Dunbar, who was a renowned African American poet. The building that housed Dunbar School was later repurposed and is now known as the Murdoch Community Center, serving as a hub for the community. So we can see in 3 of our 3 biggest cities how schools were closed down that are now hubs for the community. And we continue to deal with schools being closed down. It was named after a lady named Cleo Murdoch. She was a teacher and president of the Dunbar School. This is one of your quiz questions. In 1927, Vera Johnson was still a student at Prairie View A&M. It's a HBCU. She was asked to become a teacher. So she filled a teaching position at Booker T. Washington Elementary School in Mesa, where she taught for 17 years. Then she served as a principal for 30 years. And I believe I have a video that should play about her life.
What if I told you about a woman who changed education in Arizona forever? A woman who walked into rooms where no one looked like her and carved a path forward for generations to come. Meet Viora E. Johnson, the first African-American female principal in Mesa and the first African-American woman to earn administrative credentials in the entire state of Arizona. But her journey wasn't simple. For 17 years she was a teacher, shaping the minds of young students and believing at her core that education could change lives, no matter where a child came from or what obstacles they faced. Teaching wasn't just a job for her, it was a calling. Then came her next chapter, 30 years as an administrator, 30 years of breaking barriers, making tough decisions, and proving that leadership was about heart, vision, and persistence. It's one thing to be the first, but it's another to open doors so others can follow, and Veora Johnson did just that. Imagine the courage it takes to lead in a system that wasn't built for you, to walk into meetings, classrooms, and school boardrooms where you're the only one, but still hold your head high, set the standard, and redefine what leadership looks like. Veora didn't just thrive under pressure, she shattered expectations. Her story is about more than just her achievements. It's about the ripple effect of her work. Because of her, students believed they could aim higher. Teachers saw the possibilities of where their careers could take them. And administrators realized that leadership isn't about fitting in, it's about standing out and creating change. Her legacy lives on today in every classroom, every hallway, and every school that continues to grow because she paved the way. Veora E. Johnson wasn't just a principal. She was a force for change, a trailblazer whose impact will never be forgotten. Her story reminds us, representation matters, leadership matters, and what one person does today can change the future for thousands of others tomorrow. Veora E. Johnson's journey is an inspiration for us all.
This is L.G. Bateau. She's the first black woman to graduate with a master's degree in teaching from the University of Arizona, and was possibly the first African-American woman to graduate from the University of Arizona, leading the way for others. She started teaching in the fall of 1934 at Dunbar Junior High School in Tucson, the only school she was allowed to teach at. She would later teach at Phoenix Union Colored High School in Phoenix, and she is also, one of your quiz questions, she's also the first African-American to serve on any school board K-16. (1934), this is important to our history. The Arizona Supreme Court case Harrison versus Riddle, the court addressed the issue of racial segregation in public and elementary schools. The case arose when J.R. Riddle, a parent of an African-American child in Laguna District, Yuma County, filed a lawsuit against the district's Board of Trustees. They were requesting that schools be segregated or not be segregated for African-American pupils, and they wanted school to be inclusive of everyone. The Harrison-Riddle decision reinforced the mandatory nature of segregation across our country and in the state of Arizona. (1935), so here's Casa Grande. Rebecca Dallas, she was a beloved teacher and educator and advocate in Casa Grande community. She was an inspiration to her students. This is a picture of the one-room schoolhouse that she taught in. The couple, she was married, and her husband moved to Casa Grande in 1935. She became a teacher of the one-room Southside Color School located behind the Southside Elementary School. 1953, Phillips versus Phoenix Union High School and Junior College District. Judge Fred C. Struckmeyer, you can see the picture down in the bottom right, ruled that segregation in Phoenix high schools was unconstitutional, leading to the integration before Brown versus Board of Education. So desegregation happened in our state before Brown versus Board of Education, but it's not talked about much. 1953, Lincoln Ragsdale, very prominent name here in the Phoenix area, helped desegregate the Encanto District, which is now Osborne School District, and what was considered at the time one of our most affluent neighborhoods in the Phoenix area. Also in 1953, he helped desegregate Phoenix high schools, again, 1 year before Brown versus Board of Education. History we don't talk about within our schools. On May 5th, 1954, Judge Bernstein ruled that segregation of African-American students in Phoenix's Wilson Elementary School District was a violation of the 14th Amendment. in the Heard versus Davis case. So here you are seeing examples of how desegregation in Arizona happened before Brown versus Board of Education. And we all know the big case, Brown versus Board of Education, the picture of Ruby Bridges, and some of the things that negatively impact the African American community is now many students didn't have the opportunity to engage with teachers that look like them. They didn't have the opportunity to engage with administrators that look like them or governing board members that look like them. 1960, and I got 2022, Geneva Mosley, she's also one of your quiz questions, became the first African American teacher in Tempe, serving until 1989. Also the first African American to have a school in the Phoenix area named in her honor. And she continues to make history because this is a new building, one of the first newer middle schools that's being rebuilt within the Tempe School District. 1974, this is Tucson Unified School District. It created groundbreaking African American student, it was called African American Studies at the time, it's now African American Student Services. Still one of the few districts in the country that have such a department. In fact, other school districts have reached out over the years across the country to duplicate it. If you can see the little circle, I have Dr. Tina Puckett circled because she was the first director of the African American Student Services department. Also in that picture is Elgie Bateau, who we talked about earlier, and another lady named Laura Banks that I'm going to highlight here in a second. All right, so I want to go back here. I talked about the picture in the bottom right corner. The gentleman sitting there is Morgan Maxwell Sr. I talked about him, and I talked about Dunbar School in TUSD, and his picture was on that slide. So I wanted to come back to him. So he's the first African American to have a school named after him. The school was named after him in 1974. Interesting about that, that's the same one of the same years TUSD had a huge desegregation case. I was a student in that school district, went to my neighborhood school, and by 5th grade, I was desegregated and went to a school outside of my community. The neat thing about Morgan Maxwell, next to him is his wife. And so this is Marana history. She's the first African American to teach in Marana School District. Classrooms were segregated, and then when desegregation went into effect, when she was teaching, the story goes that none of the Anglo parents would take their students to her class. Well, during that same time, our community members of Asian descent owned a lot of the farm property, and a lot of the families worked for the owners of the farm. And so when that Asian family took their kids to her class, they all followed suit because they realized it was okay. And then the picture on the left, Morgan Maxwell, the taller gentleman on the right, that's their son. He was the first African American to integrate and eat in the student union. He was friends with the Udall brothers. We know that name, Udall. They went into the student union and asked the student union staff to feed their friend, and ever since then, cafeterias and the student union was integrated at the University of Arizona. 1983, this is Vera Johnson. She had a school named after her in 1983. And we saw her bio earlier in the presentation, the video. 1980, this is the best information I can get on Dr. Russell. Dr. Russell A. Jackson is the founder of the National Alliance of Black School Educators and served as the first president of the National Alliance of Black School Superintendents. He is recognized as the first African American superintendent in Arizona, here in the Phoenix area. He regularly comes back to Phoenix during the Summer Institute of the Arizona Alliance of Black School Educators. And I thought this was just an interesting document. In 1988, the Arizona Black Town Hall convened to address issues in public education, highlighting the ongoing challenges faced by African American students. And then here we have, you heard me talk about the Arizona Alliance of Black School Educators was established in 1989. You see a name where it says Arizona Alliance of Black School Educators, a Historical Perspective. It says by Earl Epps, Dr. Earl Epps. He was the second director of African American Student Services in Tucson Unified School District. It was called Studies at the time. And here we have Dr. Laura Banks Reed. In 2002, a school was named after her. She served as a teacher and principal at various Tucson elementary schools. She retired as the assistant superintendent, and I believe she's the first African American assistant superintendent in Tucson schools. And there's the school, a picture of the school with her name. 2007, Betty Fairfax, the picture in the bottom right, continued her lifelong passion for promoting education to students of color in the public education system. She taught in the segregated school in the 1950s at Carver High School, and subsequently became one of the first black teachers to teach, as desegregation was first ordered within the county to teach at Phoenix Union High School in 1955. And then in 2007, Phoenix Union named a school in her honor. 2010, Arizona bans ethnic studies under our current superintendent, Tom Horn, who was superintendent at the time. However, in 2017, the ban was overturned. And this is interesting to our history and education because there's so much conversation and controversy around teaching culture and history in our schools and associating teaching everyone's perspectives in schools, and in this case, African American history, it's been associated with critical race theory, which is at the higher ed level. And so this is an opportunity for students to learn their history, but that was the discourse. Now, this is something interesting many of you all may not know. There are still approximately 18 school districts in the state of Arizona that are receiving some form of desegregation funds, and it spans the entire state. And 2024 brings me to the present. First, so there was a question on there, who's the first to serve as a superintendent, who was the first to serve as an African American superintendent or board member within your district? And I know for folks in the room, you're that person. So I have to acknowledge you as I've just shared history of African American history and education in Arizona. You all, myself, we stand on the shoulders of those before us. And what's so outstanding is that with your work and continued effort and push for equity and students all being treated with respect, being affirmed, being included, the future is going to be able to stand on your shoulders. So that was not a trick question. That was designed for you all to put your name there. All right, slowing the school to prison pipeline in Arizona. So we just went from pre-colonization all the way up to 2004, where we have board members sitting in the room today. The past lingers and historical trauma persists. And many people call this post-traumatic school disorder because of the many challenges we continue to have within our education system. We continue to deal with discipline rates. We know these, we won't spend a lot of time here. We continue to deal with inequities in terms of advanced placement enrollment, which in the end impacts access to college and scholarships. The history of education for African American students is not always included within the curriculum. And then we have this association with the prisoner pipeline in terms of literacy and reading and prisons being built. And all this has had an impact. The impact on desegregation, the big impact is many of our students, when it was segregated, students got the opportunity to engage with teachers and professionals who look like them. But now that's so different. And then there's the long-term historical exclusion from the education materials, the missing materials from history. So we have a big opportunity here. And lastly, I think this is one of the ways we can change the narrative of what's happening in our schools, or going back to Carter G. Woodson's quote from 1933. We have to do something called widen the screen. This is a Procter & Gamble video that we're going to share here.
you know what happens next. Ask yourself why. These are the Black stories we've been shown. A narrow view that limits our understanding. But there's so much more to see. The full picture of Black life. Let's widen the screen so we can widen our view.
Board members, I encourage you to take this approach to widen the screen. Create as many opportunities as possible for African American students, all students, to learn each other's history, each other's culture. Thank you for engaging with me. I appreciate this. Want to give credit to ASBA and the Black Caucus for creating this opportunity to share this information with students across the state. And then what I want to share with you